Hello everyone. So starting a new After Effects composition, a new project. So we always have to start with a composition. So I can click on that. I'm just going to call this lesson 1. And these are the settings you want to make sure you have. The HD TV 1080 29.97. What that does is it gives us our composition size of 1920 by 1080. This is a standard 16:9 aspect ratio. So this is what we would use on widescreen TVs. Square pixels, frame rate 29.97 is an industry standard. Sometimes you may see 30, but this is usually what we use. Full resolution can stay, and the duration. And what this is down here, these 4 numbers are hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. Background color really doesn't matter because we're always going to add a shape into our background. We're going to add a solid to create its own layer. The reason we do that is if we want to do something special to that background, we don't have to worry about adding it later. So you can see my composition over here. That's that blank background. So let's have a refresher on some of our transformation properties. So I'm going to add a new shape. So I'm going to say shape layer. Now if you'll notice, it put the anchor point in the center. So when I draw a shape now, my anchor point is not centered in my shape. So let's say I want to do a rotation. It's going to rotate around that anchor point. So what I need to do is I need to move my anchor point, and I do that with this tool up here, the pan behind tool. So my anchor point disappeared, if you'll notice. So sometimes when you have that happen, now I can't move my anchor point, but notice now my rotation is going around it. So it did automatically center it for me when I selected the pan behind tool. Another way you can do this is you can draw a shape onto your artboard without making it a new layer, but notice it does the same thing. I still have the same problem with my anchor point. Select my pan behind tool and it centers it for me. But I fooled you. It didn't that time. So that time, because I drew my own shape, it's not centering it for me. So the anchor point needs to be centered in this shape. So how do I do that if I can't see it? So that's the problem. So you can see when I do a rotation or when I do a motion with it, that you can see the anchor point. So now that I can see it, an easy trick is to hold down Command, select your anchor point, and that will snap it directly to the center. Kind of a weird glitchy thing that After Effects does, but now when I want to rotate it, it will rotate around its center. So if you remember all of the different properties that we have, the different transforms, we have position, which is X and Y. X is horizontal, Y is vertical. We have scale, again X and Y, but they are linked. You can click on that to deselect it. We have rotation, which will rotate around the anchor point, and we have opacity. It's a good idea to get used to using key commands for those. So a P is position, R is rotation, S is scale, T is opacity. Don't ask me why, but it is. Or you can always twirl it down, but again, the quicker you use key commands, the quicker your work will be. Start by organizing your layers, and you can click on it and hit the return key and say what it is. So getting used to using the key commands, I can use P, and now in my timeline, this tool is called the CTI, or the current time indicator. I want to start a keyframe by clicking in the stopwatch and then move my CTI over where I want it to be. And when I move my shape, it will create another keyframe. And you can see this motion path. So if I get in a little closer, you can see all of those little dots in there. That's actually every motion that this is taking. Now, if I want this to be on a curve, I want my shape to curve. If I come up to the pen tool and select the convert vortex tool right there, and I click on these points, and then I get anchor points. And that's how I can make my path have a curve to it. So now when I play it, my box will follow that curve. If I want to make that a little quicker, I just move my keyframes to be closer together. So there is a quick refresher on how to use some of those transform objects. Let's add a little scale. And we'll make it smaller. Oh, it wasn't linked, so now it'll have a little bit of a difference with the scaling. And let's put a rotate on it. And I just hold down Shift and use my key command to go R. If I want to go to my next keyframe, I can certainly do it manually, but what if I'm off? So what I can do is click on this little triangle here. It will take me exactly to it, and I can add some rotation. And then a preview. It's a good idea to get used to using this tool right here, which is a motion blur. And what that does is it just adds a very subtle motion. Now, it doesn't mean you're always going to want it, but it does add a little bit of professional look to your motion graphic. So there's kind of some quick tips on using the transform tools. Another thing that sometimes that you might want to think about is when you are adding another shape to your composition. If I have this selected and I add a shape to it, if you'll notice that on my timeline, it gives me two rectangles in the same layer. And so now whatever I do to one, it's going to happen to both. So I don't necessarily want that. I just have to make sure I have deselected that layer before I add another one. And now you can see I have a second layer. And let's change the color just so that it's not so confusing. So now that's only going to affect that one layer. So little things you need to remember.